are live.
All right, thank you. All right, Dr. Hart.
Okay. Good evening and welcome to a very snowy February 1st work session. Mr. Berman, would you call the roll?
Mr. D'Amelio?
Here.
Mr. Oliva?
Here.
Mr. McCluskey?
Here.
Mr. Siegel?
Here.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes, here.
Mr. Holmes?
Here.
Mr. Wexler?
Here.
Mr. Quinn?
Here.
Dr. Hart.
Here. Chief, would you lead us in the pledge?
I will. I pledge allegiance
To the flag.
to the flag
and
Of the United States.
United States of America.
to the
to
republic,
Republic.
for which it stands,
and
one nation,
One nation.
under
Under
God,
God.
liberty and justice for all.
Liberty and justice.
justice for all. Thank you. Okay, the first item on the agenda is the Pension Investment Manager's 2020 Performance Update. Mr. Glacken?
Okay, I'm gonna go, Bikram, I guess I'll go first and go through the total performance, our performance, and then kick it back to you.
Yeah, that sounds great, Mike. Do you want me to share my screen for you so you can kind of tap through the pages? How do you want to do it?
We could, I think Amy said we would just go right through it without sharing the screen, but so I can just kind of talk my way through it.
Okay.
First want to start with, we greatly appreciate the opportunity. Given all the challenges in 2020, it ended up being an extremely positive year as far as an impact on the pension plan, and much different than when I got an email from Amy and Bikram on March 9th asking what was going to be done to deal with some of the challenges we were seeing in the downturn in the market. And some of the things that we discussed at that point was one, staying the course. So the township should be commended for staying the course. At that particular time, the stock market was down about 35%. So staying the course had a lot to do with the market performance in 2020. The second thing that we mentioned that we would do is rebalance the allocation strategy. So what happened at the end of March, stocks were down significantly. So we were given the charge of being 60% allocated to equities. What we did at that point in time is we sold bonds high and bought stocks at a significant discount. So the second thing that attributed to pretty high performance this year is we continued to buy whatever asset class was on sale. So in essence, the township was investment shopping throughout 2020. That also helped our cause in the beginning of 2020 when the stock market was extremely high from 2019. So we actually sold stocks at the beginning of the year and bought bonds and then did the reverse throughout the year. And the third, probably also just as significant impact, was the decision from the township to, in a way, dollar cost average into and pay for the pension payments out of the general cash versus taking an allocation from PFM or CBIZ INR, where we would have had to liquidate potentially stock positions. So those three things had an extreme positive impact on our performance through 2020. And then so the total pension up 15.3, and that's compared to the overall blended benchmark at 13.54. The other thing I wanted to mention is since inception now, this is the second recession that we've gone through with the township. We started our privilege to be teamed with the township back in 2008, right before the market had its significant downturn. So since inception, we've been up 6.85% when the blended benchmark that we were given the challenge of beating was up about 5.79. So we've had more than 1% overperformance from the blended benchmark since inception. This year, our part of the portfolio was up 15.15. The blended index up 13.54. So some pretty significant overperformance. Really goes back to what I said previously, rebalancing, staying the course. But we also had the biggest impact on the bond side of it. So our approach is an all market index approach using index funds from companies such as Vanguard. And then we'll provide some strategic investment allocation as we see things come up through the year that we could try to take advantage of. This year, that worked more on the bond side, which usually is not the case. And we were able to get a 10% return out of the bond market when the benchmark was roughly at 7.5. So that added to the additional performance against the blended benchmark. One of the other things that we are very proud of is our relationship on the 457 deferred compensation plan, where the individuals, there's over 70 individuals from the township who are participants in that plan, and not one of them panicked during this time frame in 2020. So they also benefited from the same type of management as the pension plan, and were buying low, selling high, stayed the course. And the overall 457 plan had a performance almost exactly the same as the pension. It was up 15.3% for the year 2020. So we're very proud of the conviction that the employees had in staying the course. We had many virtual meetings and many individual virtual meetings as well. And the employees benefited from that. So I guess at this point, Bikram, I'm just going to pass it back to you for your PFM commentary.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. And great seeing everyone tonight, albeit virtually. But, as Mike has alluded to, 2020 was an unprecedented year for a number of reasons, whether we talk about the markets, the health crisis, and everything in between. So sincerely hope that you and your families have remained healthy and well through the entire period. As Mike had mentioned, we started 2020 in a very different position than when we closed it. And, if you recall, about a year ago, Mike and I were at the township, and we were talking about the strong results of 2019 that were an outcome of the economic strength that had been experiencing domestically, be it full employment, consumer confidence, et cetera. And that all came to a screeching halt come late February. And, when you think about where the markets were at the peak in late February to the trough at the end of March, it fell, as Mike mentioned, about 35%. So we saw a third of the market erased in a matter of 1 month. I mean, certainly a stomach wrenching period as it relates to volatility, especially from a historic perspective. But, one of the, or two of the things rather, that we had discussed with Amy and Dave, Mike and I, as he mentioned, and I think I just repeat it because it had a meaningful impact to the results of the plan over the course of the year. The fact that you did not have to sell investments to fund monthly benefits during the month of February and March was tremendous, as far as allowing the portfolios to recover in a very strong way coming out of the sell-off. As we think about the sell-off, there was certainly opportunity dislocations that existed, not just in the fixed income markets, but also in the equity markets as a whole, both domestic and international. And similar to CBIZ INR and Mike and his team, at PFM, we were also looking for that opportunity. And as the group knows, our approach is slightly different than CBIZ's, in that we combine both a combination of passive investment vehicles as well as active managers to try to provide value over and above the benchmark over short and long-term periods. What we found through the course of the year, first was that with regard to our active managers across domestic equity, we had a value tilt, a quality tilt. And that quality tilt during a time of the sell-off was provided downside protection for the portfolio, which allowed us to, for the course of the year, outperform the resulting benchmark. If you take a look, 2020, domestic equities return about 25% versus the benchmark of about 20%. So it was a combination of the active managers we employed within domestic equity, as well as their quality bias that helped with that. When we take a look at international equity, we were able to earn a return for that sleeve of 23%, 22.56% for the year versus the benchmark of 10.65%. So we saw tremendous outperformance out of the international lineup, over 12% relative to the benchmark. And much of that attributable to the active managers within that sleeve that were able to find opportunity within the emerging markets arena, as well as within specific regions overseas to try to add value over and above the benchmark. From a fixed income perspective, we did end the year trailing the benchmark slightly, about 7.3% versus 7.5%. When we look at our fixed income allocation, we do have an overweight to corporate debt. And as we saw the markets sell off in the early part of the year, the corporate space really seized up. But as the Fed made a commitment to purchase treasuries and corporates, and we saw the markets recover, we certainly saw a recovery out of that space as well. Over the course of the year, though, similar to Mike and his team, we did see opportunity within both sides of the capital markets, equities and fixed income, be it the addition of small caps toward the tail end of the year, as well as the addition of international small caps as well. Within fixed income, we saw an opportunity within the municipal space for a period of time, within the convertible space as well. And we did also see an opportunity to add to emerging market debt and high yield debt through the course of the year. And so, at this point, we feel that the portfolios are positioned well for 2021. And we were able to close out 2020 with a return of 16.43% versus the benchmark of 13.54%. So we were ahead of the benchmark by about 3% for the year. All right. And the only other comment I would make, and then see if there are any questions, relates to, and this is something that Amy and I talk about when we meet, is the fact that 2019 and 2020 together our evaluation year. And so we know that the actuaries are going to come together and start to go through that process. And so with 2019's return for the portfolios of about 20%, and 2020 return of about 15%, you're looking at a 35% return in aggregate cumulatively for those 2 years. And so that should certainly help the position for the township for the next valuation cycle.
And I was just going to wrap that up by reminding the commissioners that we have a biennial valuation. So we are up for one in 2021. Since I've been here and been tracking it, you'll remember the civilian plan had a low many years ago of about 72% funded. We're now up to 87% funded on the last valuation. So, and conversely on the police, we were at a low at one point of 60% funded, and we're up over 76% funded on the last valuation. So like Bick and Mike and Jeff are all here talking about these 2 years, hopefully we're going to see those valuation numbers go up even more once the 2021 valuation is completed. And that's really the biggest factor that goes into how our MMO is calculated and things of that nature. So we were very pleased, obviously, with the last 2 years returns.
Are there any questions? Do you have any comments on the outlook for 2021?
Yeah, so go ahead, Mike. You want to start and then I can provide some context?
Sure. Well, we, again, as Bikram and both I've mentioned, there are certain points in time where we look to strategically take advantage of some aspects of the market, and some of the changes that we made at year end, we took away from the exposure we had to long-term inflation protected treasuries and moved that to more short-term, more for concern of potentially interest rates going up. So to help protect against interest rates going up with all this stimulus and accommodation from the Fed, and then, Janet Yellen talking about sending more checks out. With that concern, we've significantly lowered the duration of the bond portfolio just in case interest rates start to rise. Another thing that we did, we had a strong over bias to corporate, intermediate corporate bonds. We took half of that away and moved it into mortgage-backed securities. The belief there is that your average everyday citizen has a better balance sheet than a lot of the corporations that went out, in essence, refinancing, getting low interest rates on debt at the time. So we made those changes. We're really staying status quo on the market, and we'll continue to rebalance for now. So our relationship with domestic versus international is going to stay the same. But really everything that we see in the research is really pointing towards how resilient the U.S. consumer is going to be and what their mindset and conviction is around this pandemic. And do they continue? Right now, the average citizen feels at least okay. The fact that there is an end line coming, and then that there is, hopefully a herd immunization. But really everything stems around that mindset of the consumer, mainly here in the U.S. So we're tending to watch that. And as I said early on, we've really haven't had more conviction around the process than we do now, because we're not guessing it's so efficient. We're buying those sectors that have dropped. And if you look already in 2021, the rebalance that we did in the beginning of the year, you're seeing small cap stocks start to run. Those value blue chip stocks are starting to do better versus the large cap growth stocks that were the winning asset class in 2020. So you're starting to see a roll out from those technology FANG stocks. And you've already benefited from that so far in 2021. We're ahead of benchmark performance on the bond and stock side, mainly because of those changes I just discussed. So with that, I'll pass it back to Vic.
Yeah, I think, at the macro level, what I would say is that, we are largely constructive on the equity side. To Mike's point, we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And when you think about the U.S. consumer, we contribute up to 70% of U.S. GDP on an annual basis. And so, as our confidence continues to build up, and actually when you take a look at household savings rates, they've also ticked up. And so there's largely pent up demand as well to help support spending in the economy as we all begin to open up. And so over the short term, we're constructive on the domestic equity side. We see the markets broadening out. Last year it was largely, as Mike mentioned, the technology stocks, your top 10 S&P companies that led the markets. We now see that opportunity widening out to the rest of the marketplace. Over the intermediate term, though, we see more opportunity within the international space. We just see from a valuation standpoint that they remain attractive, and a lot of the issues that have driven their really anemic growth rate over the last, let's call it 5 to 7 years, we feel are starting to get out of the way a little bit, i.e. Brexit. And so we see some opportunity within international over the longer term. I think the biggest difference for us at a macro level is the difference within fixed income and our expectations within fixed income. So given the fact that the Fed has lowered rates and we see rates potentially being, at the floor until at least 2023, we don't anticipate much of a return out of fixed income. In fact, core bonds we essentially see as being flat for the next 5 years. And so in order to earn return out of fixed income, similar to Mike and his team looking out to mortgages, we see you can't own treasuries, you can't own kind of the ag and expect a good relative return to history. And so we see an opportunity more across spread sectors and out on the risk curve, thinking about, as I mentioned, emerging market debt, high yield debt, investment grade corporates. And so that's really going to be the area of the market to focus to try to earn something out of fixed income, at least for the foreseeable future.
Anyone else with any questions? Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Fully.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your service.
Appreciate your strong performance.
Yeah, well done.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Take care, everyone.
Stay safe and healthy.
You as well.
Okay, next on the agenda is another presentation by Dr. Gail Farrelly Semerid for the Haverford Township Adult School.
Mr. President, there was a miscommunication, and I think the Haverford Township Adult School felt they were making their presentation next week, not this week.
Okay,
So if it's possible, could we put them on the agenda for next week?
sure. Don't see any problem with that.
And it won't be Gail Summerod. She is no longer the president. There'll be two other individuals that will be making the presentation. So I'll get the names to Dave and Gloria, so we can get them on the agenda with the proper people that are going to be making the presentation.
Okay, thank you. The next item was going to be a presentation by Dave Pannoni, our township engineer, but we're also going to postpone that. The initial presentation was to focus on the 5th Ward, and we're going to push it back until he can give us a little more broader perspective on all the wards. There's a number of areas that have problems with flooding, so that will be in the coming months. Commissioner committee update. Does anyone have any updates?
I attended the Bureau of Fire meeting the other night, and they're going to provide me with a monthly update on statistics for not only the board but the public each month, to give them an update on what the activities, significant training milestones, number of calls, major calls, that type of stuff, apparatus status that you'd all be interested in. So that'll be good. That'll start next month.
Thank you.
Will somebody from the Bureau of Fire be doing it, Bill, or you?
Likely me to start, because and if we have any significant questions, Chief Viola is at all our meetings, so he can answer anything specific.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to a discussion of boards and commissions. I thank Commissioner Siegel for giving us all a handout on the number of positions on each board and the terms. Is there anyone want to start a discussion of that at all? I think we came to this because we were looking to add members to the Parks and Rec Board, but then there were a number of other boards that were under consideration.
I've reached out to the Grange. I haven't heard back from them, so I'll check back with them or out this week and see what they say.
Mr. President, for the benefit of the public, could Dan review what the recommendations were in terms of the expansion of the commissions?
It wasn't, what was happening is that we have, if you look back, made sort of piecemeal changes to the composition of the boards and sometimes the terms. And rather than continue to do that, because it's confusing, at least it was to me, I compiled all of the boards where we potentially, probably except for cable and range, can make whatever changes we want in terms of members, and some of the boards, including health and parks, are 5-year appointments. And that at least from my perspective, seems a little long. So that at least here, if we want to either standardize boards or expand or contract or limit terms, we at least can do it as one ordinance rather than, the sort of ad hoc approach we've done. Just by background, the cable board, we really can't change without more other ordinances, and I don't think we need to. But the other boards are, for the most part, potentially changeable by ordinance. But I don't think most of us, at least I didn't have this type of sort of what I'll call a cheat sheet until now.
Yeah, something that sticks out to me is just a 5-year term seems excessive. It looks like there's health and Parks and Rec seems like quite a discouraged turnover.
Yeah, it's a long time. We should reduce that. Maybe do 3 years on those.
And similarly, I don't know, I mean,
People on
historically, go ahead.
How many people are on the Parks and Rec board currently?
9.
Nine.
I don't know, we kicked around some ideas last time and started talking about what we could do in particular with Parks and Recs. We have 34 boards. We have a lot of different constituents that need representation on that board. I think it should be 3-year terms and not 5. I think there should be 15 people on that board. I think 9 of them should come from each, 1 should come from each ward, and then the other 6 could be picked as at large, decided by us as a board. I think that's one way to guarantee geographic representation on the board. I think it's also another way to guarantee a variety of constituent interests for the board. It's not hard for one sport or one topic to dominate Parks and Rec, and with 5-year terms, it can be hard to get some of those dominating factions counterbalanced by new people. So I would recommend that, every term that any term that's currently been done be, if it has 3 years left on it, it has 3 years left on it. If it has 4 or 5, that it be reduced to 3. We cycle those people off, not off, but cycle that term finished. And I would suggest that these, to the extent we have a series of openings, we do some people for 1-year terms, some people for 2-year terms, some people for 3-year terms, where we can have turnover, guaranteed board seats coming up each year. So we don't have one complete turnover of the board at one time, but can balance it out over a number of years.
We could have like the odd wards up some years and the even wards up other years.
Well, what you'd have, if we did, look, we could do anything. Mm-hmm. The 6 people picked by the board as what I would call at-large members of that board, they could have multi-year terms. They could have a 3-year term, let's say, and 2 of them are elected to 1-year term, 2 of them elected to a 2-year term, 2 of them are elected to a 3-year term. And then the 2 people that were elected to the 2-year term, that seat comes up again the following year, and then those seats are available for a 3-year term. That's how you cycle in a revolving board like that. Then the decision we'd need to make is whether or not our individual ward assignments would be just yearly, or would they be 2-year assignments, or would they be 3-year assignments? And we have, if we're talking about 3 years, again, you can do the same kind of thing where every year a third of this board, if they're 3-year terms, every year a third of this board, its seats become available.
I made a suggestion we should have 9, just 9, and yearly appointments. No, don't give them a term, yearly appointments. That's what I would do. I think going any more than that, I think Brian even discussed that in the last meeting.
But I think when we did the interviews, it became pretty apparent that there were a lot of people throughout the township that really wanted to have a say in their local parks. And that we didn't have enough representation to give our Parks Department enough feel for across the township. So I think that's the reason it came up. It was out of the interview process that there were just so many people applying for it that they wanted to be heard. And it's just a mechanism to allow Brian to have a greater source of advice because they're advisory. They don't make policy. He makes the policy and makes the recommendations to us. So it's not going to change his job. It's just going to, the meeting room, as long as it's big enough, he can hear him out and he can make up his own mind about what changes he wants to make and recommend for budgeting and for us to do. So that's my 2 cents on it. I think more people that feel like they can be part of our community, the better.
I would concur with Commissioner Holmes in, first off, going from 5 to 3 year, and then expanding the board from 9 to 15 with each ward commissioner having an appointment, then the 6 remaining being appointed by the board at large. At the Bill's point, I think there's such a wealth of talent of people that want to contribute. And this is certainly one of the areas, Parks and Rec, I don't think there's other than zoning and probably planning, I don't think there's a more important board to serve on in this township. So I would, given that every year that we interview, we continue to see more and more interest and more people with varied talent, sets of skills, and willing to step forward and serve. So I would personally support what Commissioner Holmes suggested.
Thank you, Commissioner Lewis. We had this year, last year, the year before, we have had to send out far more thanks but no thanks letters to people than we have congratulations to serve on our boards. There's too many great people who want to volunteer our time for us to artificially limit the number of folks whose advice I think we'd really benefit from.
Yeah, I agree with you, Larry. When I first came on the board, there was not a lot of people applying for these boards. And now we've seen just an increase, an incredible increase. And we should do everything we can to include these people in the process if they want to be part of the process. So I'm all for increasing the board to 15 members. To increasing the board, the 6 at-large seats, and then the each appointment, and reducing that term. That sounds great.
I think that increase in volunteerism it didn't happen in a vacuum or just because of something in the water. We as a board have listened to people. We have the township staff have certainly turned to and been far more receptive than boards from 15 or 20 years ago to the input of our constituents and the input of these advisory boards. I think people want to be on them because I think they've seen the impact the boards can have, and I think we benefit. I think we'll benefit from their enthusiasm.
Yeah, I didn't really want to get into that. What used to happen on these boards and those appointments and how that process happened and how we opened that up to anyone who wanted to be part of the process. So
even Democrats.
That's right. Exactly. Everyone realizes that we really want their input, and it's not just, not an act. And so they're coming forward. And it really is a good thing to see.
So it would seem to me we need to come up, Dan, do we need an ordinance to do this or a resolution? Would it do it?
No, that's why I had it listed this way. It's a revision of the code. So it just requires, some redrafting and essentially sort of mapping out who's left, how we sort of integrate, if you do it the way you're discussing, commissioner appointments, and sort of we're actually phasing out 3 of the seats. And I think, between, Mr. Byrne, me, Brian and the township manager, we should be able to put this together. It's almost, it's just mapping out who's coming up and when, but it has to be an ordinance revision. That's why I listed all the code sections, which also, if anyone wanted to read them, you could go and see them.
I wondered, are there any of the other boards? I'm just looking at health, and we have a 5-year term there. It's also a board where, we last year didn't reappoint the veterinarian. There's a lot of different needs. It might be a board we would want to expand. I don't think to 15, but we might want to add some members, maybe to 11, and shorten the terms.
How many are on the health board?
9.
I don't think any term should be 5 years among these boards. I think we have
they should be
consensus
3.
there.
Yeah, 3. I agree. 3 is I think the max.
Yeah, I mean, the only ones that are longer, cable, which is set, and the Historic Commission. Everything else is much shorter, and I'm excluding zoning and planning because they're not in the same discussion.
Right, they're statutory, right? Is that determined by the state level?
It's, yeah, we're governed by that as well.
So, Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. Holmes.
You probably have the closest interactions with the Health Advisory Board. Is if we reduced our term to 3 and kept the number at 9, I guess the most, and then I think one other thing we have to do is we have to reduce, and I'm sure there's not a problem with this, we reduce the current term of anybody who's greater than 3 years, just down to 3 years. Do you see a need for more varied and more input, in absolute numbers for more people in the advisory board, or do you think reducing the term will give us the kind of openings and opportunities we're hoping for?
I think that there's probably adding a couple of spots might help. There are definitely, especially if the county is going to finally to a health department, there's going to be more input needed from our health department. And I think the more support that we can give them, this year, some of the people that we didn't appoint, we had an epidemiologist who would have, the people we appointed were great, but there were some individuals that left off that could have added something to that board.
So we're what, the second largest township in Delaware County? I mean, should we move to 12? I mean, it should be divisible by 3, just so it's easy for us to deal with terms.
Yeah, at 12 would work for me.
And is that the kind of thing where we want regional representation at the, per ward, or do we just want 12 people the board agrees?
Yeah, I don't see any reason for regional. I think just 12 people.
Yeah, I agree.
I think expertise is more important than that board.
Yeah, I'm certainly for 12 3-year terms, and retool it right now so that we can start staggering those off over the next 3 years. Staggering the, recycling, not necessarily cycling people off and on, but opening the seats up again.
I'm supportive of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, the Historic Commission, is that 5 years also?
Historic Commission is 4.
Do we want to reduce that to 3?
I would.
Yeah, I think if we can get as consistent across the board as we can, I think that'd be a good start.
If we were reducing it to 3, do we want to increase the number from 8 to 9 just to make it easier?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would make sense.
Well, they do have a
9th member.
They get a 9th member from, there's a planning board representative of some.
Yeah, so they do have 9
I'm
members.
blanking on the name, but so they have 9 members at their name. So if we increased it to 9, then they'd have an even number. So I think you need to leave it at 8.
Okay.
Or go to 10. But I don't think there's been. I think 8's been fine for them, and reducing it to 3 is probably okay too.
I think, Dan, I think you probably touched on it already or have already looked into it, but some of this stuff is controlled by the charter and by the regs that we have in existence. So we're going to have to take a look at that. I mean, I think the ideas are great, but We just have to make sure we're changing what we need to change.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. That's why I started with the code sections here,
Right. Okay.
because I wouldn't have known otherwise all of these.
Right. Right. Okay.
And do we want to stay with one for senior citizens or make it similar to environmental advisory, which is a 2-year term?
I think keep,
Have we seen any issues with senior advisory?
I think it's a tough board to fill.
Yeah,
I think 1 year. I think 1 year is fine.
I think too, just so then we are filled for a year and then just for.
That's right. You don't have to come up with somebody new each time.
Yeah.
What about the EAC? That seems to be another area where we have just so much talent.
Well, what the EAC has done is there are
already 200 people on the EAC.
Yeah, well, there are only 9 voting members, but they have their meetings can have 30 people at them. That there are a lot of adjunct members, so I don't think we need to increase them.
Peter's comfortable with the way.
Yeah, I think he's comfortable with the way things are.
Okay.
I think we also got to publicize these. As you just pointed out, all these meetings are open to the public.
Mhm.
All these advisory, they're open to the public for any members of the public to attend. So we need to highlight that so we get those interested folks to get there.
How about the skating rink?
There's 9 members. I know 3-year terms, I believe.
Correct.
Yes.
I mean, I think there's basically 3 universes in the stadium. There's figure skating, there's hockey, and there's, just members of the public, recreation. I have a feeling that if we had 18 members of that board, we'd have 9 people on figure skating and 9 people on hockey, and they'd be at each other like the farmer and the cowman in Oklahoma. Any reason to change 9?
I don't think so.
No.
In fact, this year, we didn't have anyone apply. We thought there was an opening. It turned out there wasn't, but so it isn't one where we're getting a lot of people applying.
I suspect, I hope that's COVID related. I can tell you from personal experience in the last 2 weeks, there's people turning out for the hockey clinics. There's people turning out for the skating clinics. People are happy to see the stadium back open even partially. And I'm pretty sure we're going to be subscribed for these open sessions if we consider doing them.
And the last thing I'll throw out is the shade tree is 7 members. Is it active enough that we need 7 or just leave it? I don't know. I haven't dealt with it to that extent to know.
I think that I've had a number of interactions with Mark Pennington, who leads it. I think he's happy with the 7. I think, yeah, I think I would leave it where we are.
For the benefit of the public and for me, what exactly does the Shade Tree Commission do?
The Shade Tree Commission does a number of things. They do review anything that goes to the Planning Commission that involves shade, need for replacing trees, that has to go to the Shade Tree Commission, and they make their recommendations. If we eventually change our ordinance, they will, in regards to development, they'll probably be busier than they were previously because there's going to be more restrictions on trees being taken down or more need for replacement of those trees. So they tend to be fairly active. They also have taken over what the tree tenders used to do of tree giveaways in the fall that the township sponsors. The Shade Tree Commission ran it this past year and plans to do it again next year.
Does the Shade Tree Commission members attend every planning commission meeting?
No, but a developer needs to then meet with the Shade Tree Commissioner commission after they go to the planning commission, generally on most projects.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, you're right. You're hitting nail right on the head that, you know, they do play a pretty important role because they do, you know, they interpret the ordinances. It's like our subdivision and land development ordinances require shade trees and when trees can be taken down and when they're put up. So they kind of work hand in glove with the planning commission. You know, so, you know, while they don't go to every meeting, there is assignment to developers to go to the shade tree commission to work out things on when they're going to take down some trees and put up some others.
Okay.
Unless there's anything else, I think I have to just get together with Mr. Byrne and work through it and then get a draft to everyone and go from there.
Okay.
Is that a consensus?
Yeah.
That sounds great. Thank you, Dan, for taking the lead with this.
Thank you, Dan.
Moving on to the police department crime update, Chief Viola.
Thank you, Commissioner. Monthly chief's report for January 2021. Criminal arrests 18, juvenile arrests 2, traffic citations issued were 100, 29 traffic citations, 77 written warnings, and 228 parking tickets. We had 3 motor vehicle thefts, so they all came from U-Haul, vehicles that weren't returned. We have 4 thefts from autos or attempts, and 100 block of Foster. Officers were patrolling in the area and they saw 3 subjects. Then they began to flee on foot. Officers gave chase and caught up with them. All 3 subjects, 1 adult and 2 juveniles, were arrested and charged with the thefts. And the 200 block of Foster was included in that, 100 block of Juniper. And then we had one of the 3300 block of Darby Road. Bicycle thefts, 1200 block of Township Line Road, Paganos. Victim left his bike outside unlocked when he went in to make a purchase. When he came out, the bike was gone. Officers reviewed the video, put it out, and the next day we got a call, or officer saw somebody riding the bike in question and arrested a juvenile for the theft of the bicycle. A bicycle was stolen from the 2600 block of Haverford Road to 7-Eleven. Victim left his bike outside, didn't lock it, and it was taken, being investigated. On 126, police were dispatched to the area of 2800 block of Rising Road to a residence for a violent mental health incident. Family members were referenced suicide by cop and threats of setting the residence on fire by the perpetrator. The police established a perimeter. We attempted to communicate with the subject for a period of time. He wouldn't answer the phone. At that point, we called the SRT team in and the negotiators. We tried to make contact multiple times. Still could not get a hold of them. Officers did enter the house, found the subject passed out on the couch, taken into custody, taken to Crozier Crisis Center for mental health evaluation. Then we have 5 canine usages, and that's it.
Thanks, Chief.
You're welcome.
Chief, we doing okay in this weather? Any bad accidents or anything? Anybody?
We had one this morning, 2050 Westchester Pike. Vehicles going westbound on Westchester Pike at a high rate of speed, in all probability. Lost control, crossed the medial strip, and hit the front of the building at 2050 Westchester Pike.
Yikes.
We've had a few today, nothing dramatic, a few fender benders and a couple of reportables, nothing serious. Luckily, traffic has been very light.
It stays that way for a while.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Moving on, we're going to, yes.
Would there be a way, considering the discussion about bikes getting stolen, for us to do some kind of promotion for, like, you know, elementary school and middle school kids or something?
Well, it's a consideration, just as we did a few years ago for gun locks, but they were given to us by organizations. So maybe we could find someone who could, we can partner with and get free bike locks for kids so they will lock their bikes. But we can't get into schools right now to do any programs, so that's part of the problem.
How many
It's
kids?
it's a good idea, though.
Yeah.
There's more and more bikes out there now with what's been going on.
Okay, thank you. The next item is a discussion on the Brookline School, and I thought I would just give a little history of how we've gotten to where we are. It was a year ago, I think in February, we were about to vote on taking down the Brookline School, and we heard from a number of residents who wanted to see the building preserved and wanted us to explore every option. So actually, the vote was tabled, and a subcommittee was formed. The subcommittee spent 6 months looking at alternatives. It was felt that the most likely alternative that to enable us to preserve the building would be to put out an RFP for a developer some developers had expressed interest in the building for some type of housing, either senior housing, condominiums, or apartments. We had also explored the township renovating the building, and it was felt that the cost, which was estimated to be about $10 million for usage that we didn't have, that was probably something that we were not going to pursue.
Mr. President, just
yes,
to clarify that my understanding from Dave Pannoni was that $10 million was just to bring it up to
exactly right.
Not moving a single wall. That's just to bring it up to new air conditioning, get the asbestos out, all those kind of things. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So it's an investment of significantly more than 10 million to do something like apartments or something along that line.
Well, then the township wouldn't be doing apartments. So if,
No,
but yeah, so if the township, would be investing $10 million for a use that we don't have now. I mean, we felt if we were going to preserve the building, that a private developer, as had done with the Lanark School, has been done, which were turned into apartments or condominiums, that would be probably the only way that we could pursue it. We had an agreement. The first step in that was to see if the school district would give us permission to pursue development. And we did. I reached out to Haverford School District President, Mr. Feinberg, who expressed a willingness, but did want to review the transfer agreement that had been made with the township. And unfortunately, when that agreement was reviewed, the fact is that the school district could not allow us to sell the property to a private developer. That the agreement was that we would only use it for community use, that we could, the property itself could be turned into a park, or the building could be used for another use that was community focused, but not to a developer. So,
yeah, Mr. Chairman, just I'm sorry to interrupt, but
sure.
Additionally, the school code prevents us from doing that as well. So it's not merely the agreement and the school district, but the actual code itself doesn't allow that. So.
Thank you. Yeah, for clarifying that. So we, unfortunately, I don't think we have an option at this point to preserve the school. We were probably back to where we were last February, and would be need to looking at, maybe preserving some of the stone, but that the building itself will most likely need to come down. Any comments from commissioners?
I would concur with that view. I mean, to think that we'd to try to make a community use out of it, and spend $10 million before we move a single wall. And we don't have community uses that I know of that can step forward. And quite frankly, I don't think we want to be a landlord also. So I'm fully supportive of taking the building down and turning it into a park.
Yeah, I know that some of the comments from residents have been, we could use a community center and various other things. I mean, one of the things is also the impact on the neighborhood. And while I don't know that we would have the funds to build the community center, I don't think that would be an area where we would want to be bringing a lot more traffic. It's just something of that sort would have a major impact on the neighborhood. And so would certainly not be something I would be in favor of.
Yeah, and a community center wouldn't be $10 million. Community center would be a lot more than that.
Exactly.
Just getting us back to code is 10 million. Building a community center there would be a lot more than that. We didn't build the library there because it was so expensive, and I'm really not for spending a lot of money for a community center. I would have liked to have seen it go to development, but that is not in the cards. So we have to move forward on these things. And I am in favor of although reluctantly, in favor of taking the building down and using it for recreation.
It will also, with that decision made, we've been holding back on moving forward on deciding what we do with the township building. So it will now allow us to finally move on what has just been a vacant building. And I expect that then I'll have the property committee meeting in the next few weeks, or virtually meeting, to begin that process, because it's been on hold for quite a while pending decision on the Brookline School.
Any other commissioners? Okay. Moving on to the items on next week's agenda.
So, Mr. President,
yes.
Would that be on next week's agenda for first reading, or would that be at the March meeting that we would take formal?
I think we could put it on next week's agenda if we have an agreement.
I would be in favor of that.
Me too.
Okay.
My only concern with that is the number of people that came to us and said, we did this without telling them during a pandemic and everything, to give them the right to, give them the opportunity to come and speak, enough time to come and speak to us. We know what they're going to say, but it's their right to come. So.
I would agree with that, but we've had.
No, I trust me, I'm with you, but I just.
Well, I just wonder, I mean.
Putting it out, that's all.
We're talking about putting it out to bid, so we're talking about something that would probably, I believe the last time there was, it's either 60 or 90 days. So
it'll be the same resolution that authorizes the township manager and the engineer to solicit bids for the demolition, and then we have to approve them once the bids are received and opened.
Right, and what I was saying is there's a period of time for the bids to be open. So if the bids are going to be open for 60 days, it
brings us to like May.
It would be a minimum of 60 days to at least 60 days to prepare bid documents and receive the bids.
So
advertise.
60 or 90, was 90 probably more realistic?
We could get it done in 60 because we've already prepared the documents. 60 to 90 is a good way to say it.
I think that would give, the last time we did this process, we ended up not following through on it. So it is going to give time for public comment. But if we end up moving forward, it's a project then we could get done this year.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of public comment on this particular subject. A lot of people have spoken on it, and a lot of people came out and joined the group in which, I was part of, and Connor and Jerry. A lot of the public came out to support looking at these sort of things. So I think we've had plenty of public input. I don't think we're trying to push something through here. I think that if we put it on the agenda, you have, like you're saying, 60 to 90 days before we can even take any action.
And then that can give everybody time to come out and express their views on it too. So.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we'll put it on for next week's agenda. The other items for next week, the police department reappointment, chief of the police and emergency management coordinator, John Viola. Are there any comments?
How many chief titles is that?
Don't say one, Andy.
Now he's got 4 because he's the head of the Delaware County Police Chiefs Association. So that's 4, chief.
That's 1, 2, 3, about 4. Yeah, you're right.
Okay. I'm gonna make sure you have enough.
I got room for more.
It's also a number of ordinances. It'll be the second reading of the lease for the Haverford Township Free Library. Do we have any comments? It's also going to be the first reading of a traffic ordinance with in regards to special purpose parking zone on Vernon Avenue and rescinding a parking on Berkeley Road. Another lease coming up will be the first reading of the Stadium renewal and the Stadium Pro Shop renewal contract. There's also a resolution next week for the liquid fuels funding. This is the funding that we use to pave our streets every few years. There are a number of contract awards. Well, actually just one, the Bureau of Fire tower purchases. And also police department purchases. I don't know if Chief Viola, if you want to comment on that.
Yes, I will, Commissioner. Thank you. What we've been looking at in the police training room and the 2 rooms for interrogation rooms in the Detective Bureau and in the cell block area. We do not have cameras, recording devices in either one of those rooms, which is kind of critical for safety standpoints and for court documents. So we want to move forward with that, and we want to upgrade what we have in our police training room. And we've done extensive training in-house since the pandemic. So we're installing a speaker system, hooking the 2 TVs together because it's a double room there, and with all the necessary work that has to go with it. Now, this is not coming out of money that is tax money or out of our budget. This money is money that's given back to us from the federal government. It's money that's collected from crimes and given back to us a certain percentage between the county and the government. So we keep that money. Amy keeps a separate account on that. So we save it for really important purchases that aren't budgeted, and we felt this was an important upgrade for the police department. So
Great, thank you. It also looks like we're going into the hybrid.
we are. We're purchasing a Ford Interceptor hybrid Explorer. So we'll once that's approved, I'll get that ordered next week. Luckily we moved forward early, like we normally do. We were notified right after last meeting that Chevrolet cut off all orders right 2 days after we put ours in. So we were close, and Ford's going to be right behind us. So we're going to get this moving as soon as possible. I don't know what the issue is with the manufacturers. Either they can't keep up with it, but it's been difficult over the past couple of years with cutoff dates.
And will this be the first hybrid vehicle?
No, we have one hybrid vehicle. This will be the first patrol hybrid. One of the hybrids is a lieutenant's car, which is used in patrol, but this will be a full-time unmarked patrol vehicle. It's going to be one of our ghost cars. So once that gets in, but it'll be a full-time patrol car.
Great. Any comments? Thank you. A number of appointments, our civil service solicitor. They're going to be senior citizen. Does anyone tonight have a senior citizen?
I've tried a lot, so I might be talking to you, Jerry. You said you might have a few.
I have backups. Yes, definitely.
Well, okay, and I might be using one of yours. So
okay,
I'll let you know.
Vacancy committee. We have applications for the solar ad hoc committee, and we have to name a planning commission liaison to the historical commission because the previous liaison has been, we had placed him on the zoning hearing board.
Is that our call? The planning commission doesn't choose that person?
Yeah, I thought the planning commission did that.
Planning commission does that.
Technically, they do. It is their, their member to, recommend, but it is all appointed technically by the board. So we only have one person who stepped up late, so I think it'll be a pretty easy appointment.
So we're going to take the planning commission's recommendation is what you're saying. Okay, all right.
Thank you for that clarification.
And we'll also have a civil service commission, a promotion of a lieutenant in the police department.
Oh, great.
Mr. President, can I bring up one other thing?
Sure.
Which I've talked to you about. I know the board's talked about lighting at Karakong. We decided not to do it this year. I think the thinking was that we'd try to do it in 2022. They have come back to us and asked for us to pay for lighting the field, I think from April, starting in April. And I'm not sure how many months ago, but and they came back with a price, but obviously they can't do that. We need to put that out to bid ourselves. So I was going to suggest that we, if we could put it on next week's agenda. I know it's going to be, our first reading in February, second reading in March, and trying to get the lights in April. So that's why there's some urgency to this. So I'd ask if I can bring it up under new business next week, or whether we can just simply add it to the agenda for discussion next week, whatever.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
This is to rent lights for the season, is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Do we have any estimate what that's going to cost?
Like 12, I think like 12 grand, like that. They paid for it last year, but I think a lot of these organizations, like, they're not only teaching our kids how to play baseball, and they're also maintaining the fields, which is a lot of work. And then we're asking them to raise money to put lights up too. So I think at a point there's, we need to step in and as a township and do some things to help them. So
I think we can add it to the agenda. I mean, personally, I'm not in favor of it. The Little League's been in existence for 60 years without lights. The day is as long as it was 60 years ago. There's not necessarily more kids. So I'm not, if we ultimately are going to add lights to the field at Karakong, that will be a board decision, but I'm not sure about renting lights for a year. Again, we can vote on it as a board next week.
Yeah, if we could,
And as long as it's not limited to, if it's open for anybody's use, other soccer or any other field use when they're not using it and want to use the lights, if we're paying the rent, that seems to be fair for all our citizens, that's all.
Yeah, I'm sure that's not a problem.
I'm not so sure that isn't a problem.
It is a yes. I
agree, but it's got to be, we're gonna pay for it out of everybody's tax money, then everybody gets to use them.
Well, that's the same. It's true with any field with lights, right? So,
Yep. We gotta break this string of provincialism, that's all.
yeah.
And then that's where we had the discussion before, just about even adding lights to the field of, we now have two lighted fields, and that there's not a reason that the leagues can't share those fields. Township, well, the one,
Genther, the Veterans Field and the Creek,
the Creek is,
the Little League field.
the Creek is really for the Babe Ruth uses it. It's not a Little League field. I mean, and actually, if you're going to talk about needs, it's the older kids do not necessarily have as many opportunities to play under the lights. But, if even with 2 fields and 3 leagues, we could arrange the.
Sure, I agree.
I think it was the recommendation, the unanimous recommendation of the Parks Board that we permanently light that field at some point. So I think.
Well,
for a year.
I think it's ultimately our decision.
I agree with that, but saying they went through the proper channels and they have, if I'm right, Brian, they got a recommendation unanimously that it made sense to do it there. So, but it's not my ward. It's Commissioner Holmes's ward. So, I'm just trying to do what's best by that league. I know a lot of other leagues are benefiting from fields that do have lights like you do, Jerry. So, but there are a lot of fields that don't have lights. So, anyway, but we can have a discussion.
And Commissioner Lewis, I didn't bring up the issue about other use as a telegraph of how I'm voting on this. I'd like to light the field, and I don't think baseball fields can be used for soccer and other sports because they're going to wreck the field.
Other leagues can use them.
I'd like to make sure that we do things fairly, but we may have to do things, one site at a time. So I thought it was going to be a lot more than $12,000, and so I'm certainly pleased to hear that estimate. And I'd like to know more about what fields are lighted. I'd like to know how many fields out there that are baseball that are lighted are used for anything other than baseball. And then,
well, maybe Brian could give us a presentation before.
Yeah, then I'll consider very seriously your request. I appreciate your point about the 6th ward, but I don't think any of these fields really, at the end of the day, belong to any of the wards. They are township-wide and township assets, and everybody in the township pays for them. And certainly your advocacy for this group isn't based upon its geographic location, but obviously the relationships you have with folks that are important folks in that organization whose work you respect, as do I. So I appreciate your point.
Thank you. So maybe Brian could give us that information next week.
Yeah, I can give you information on which fields are lit and which user groups use those fields.
And what's the potential for other groups to use this field?
Well, we had the conversation at the park board meeting, and the park board did vote to support the lights at Caracung. One of the conversations was who else could use that facility. Now, Caracung, I think is hoping to play both spring and fall ball, which would be a challenge. The other thing is there's, other organizations in town that play Little League that don't have the advantage of having lit fields that will want an opportunity to play on a lit field while waiting for, whether we decide to light other fields in the townships. That's something that has to be considered.
Okay, so we'll discuss it next week. I don't know, Mr. Berman, do you want to make any comment on the snow and the state of the roads in the township?
Sure thing. I just spoke with Public Works Director Dan Mariani a little while ago. The crew did take a break for dinner, and they're back out doing the main roads as we speak. And they're going to hit the main roads, and they're going to take another break. Hopefully the snow will let up, and they'll get back out probably around 1 a.m. to hit everything in earnest. The roads are a little treacherous right now. Obviously, we want folks to stay home and stay safe.
What's the forecast as to when it's going to end? Do you know, Dave or Keith?
Yeah, I think by the time we hit those wee hours of the morning, 1, 2 a.m., it should lighten up is what we're understanding, at least at this point. And then that's why they're waiting until then to get back out and hit those roads in earnest. Yes. And Dr. Hart, by the way, I just received a notice. The school district is fully virtual tomorrow, and the township building, the CREC, and the stadium, and I imagine a library as well, will all be closed so that we can give folks enough time to, our crew has to shovel out all those buildings, and they're also plowing the snow. So we're going to have all those facilities closed tomorrow. We'll be working from home.
Okay, great. Well, everybody stay safe. Is there anything else?
Yeah, Dr. Hart, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I should have mentioned in the beginning and I forgot. We did have a executive session tonight to discuss some litigation matters and some real estate matters, which are appropriate matters for executive session, but we should announce it so the public knows.
I should have mentioned it.
Dr. Hart, you want to mention the closing of Caracon Drive?
Yes, the Caracung Drive, we finally got permission from PennDOT to close it on Sundays throughout the year, and on Thanksgiving it was closed this past Sunday. And despite the cold temperatures, there was actually quite a number of people out. I think it's something that people are pretty excited about, certainly in my area of the township. I appreciate your help with that, Chief Iola. Okay, if there's nothing else, we're adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.